You've been chalking it up to stress, the brain fog, the sleep that doesn't restore you, the anxiety that shows up at 2 a.m. for no reason. The way you've been able to push through anything and now pushing feels like it's sucking the life out of you. And you've told yourself you're overcommitted. You've tried better sleep practices and more magnesium and cutting out wine during the week. Some of it helps for a minute too, but the root underneath all of it is still there. And then you start thinking, well, is it me? Am I losing it? Is this just how it's going to be? Why is this happening? Welcome to some variant of menopause. Today, we're going to talk about menopause and perimenopause, what they look like, why the medical system keeps missing and dismissing them, and why it matters specifically for your business, and what to do about it in ways that go a lot deeper than most conversations about them ever go. Welcome to the Frequency of Yes, the podcast for women leaders creating limitless success, deep empowerment, and divine wealth on their terms. I'm Kirsten Carey, and I'm obsessed with helping badass women feel good in their bodies so they can sustain wildly successful businesses without grinding or continuing to sacrifice themselves. Let me start with what menopause and perimenopause are, because most of us were never given a really accurate picture of them. Culturally, we've been handed this shorthand that menopause is an event. Your period stops, hot flashes begin, you're done. And that's not how it works. Menopause is technically one day. It's the day that marks 12 consecutive months without a period. The average age for that in the US is 52. Everything before that, often running 3 to 10 years before that, is perimenopause. And perimenopause can begin in the early 40s. And for some women, it even starts in their 30s. And then everything after that, that one menopausal day, is postmenopause. So let's do some math together. If you're 47 right now and you're feeling off, you could have been in perimenopause starting at 38 and not even known it. And that's not a failure of self-awareness. That's a failure of the conversation we've been having around women's health in general. Because perimenopause does not look the way that we've been taught to expect. You can be in perimenopause with a regular period. You can be in perimenopause without a single hot flash. And side note, the reason hot flashes are the holy grail symptom for perimenopause is because it's the only symptom the medical community cannot blame on something else. The symptoms that typically show up first and most persistently are the ones that look like stress. They look like burnout. They look like a personality change. So they get missed, they get dismissed, they get misdiagnosed. And women in their 40s and their early 50s often get lost in this for years. I'm a natural health professional. I have worked with women's health for more than 15 years. And I will tell you, when I first started going through this myself, I did not know that's what it was. For years, I didn't actually know. And I kept looking for other explanations. And if that was my experience with the background that I have, imagine what it's like for women who have never been given any framework about this at all. So let me walk you through what's going on physiologically, because this needs to be a more than a surface level conversation. And if you've been with me for a while, you've heard me reference the adrenal and ovarian hormone production split. Before perimenopause, your ovaries and your adrenal glands are sharing hormone production about 50-50. Now, as perimenopause progresses, the ovaries begin to slow down. The adrenals are then designed to pick up the slack to ease you through this transition. The problem is that if your adrenals are already running depleted from years of chronic stress and high output, they don't have the reserve to pick up where the ovaries left off. And that's where the cascade begins. Now, I laid out a lot of this foundation in episode 22. Today, we're going to go deeper. But before I go any further, I want to be super clear that every single woman experiences this phase differently, though there's many common threads. I'm going to cover the common threads today, but you could also notice threads such as frozen shoulder, hip pain, diminished hearing and vision, stiff joints, low sex drive. But they all stem from the same root issues, which I'm going to cover. So just so you know, your representation of this phase, it's 100% valid. It's true and it's normal. Now, one of the first things that women often notice in this phase, it's not a hot flash, it's sleep patterns, specifically waking up between 1 and 4 in the morning, unable to go back to sleep, wired and exhausted all at the same time. Progesterone has a calming, sedative-like effect on the nervous system, and it works on the GABA receptors in your brain, the ones that regulate sleep depth and the ability to stay asleep, and most importantly, to get restorative, reparative sleep. Now, the really important piece to understand here is that cortisol, which is also known as your stress hormone, cortisol and progesterone have an inverse relationship. When one goes up, the other one goes down. Chronic stress causes high cortisol, which steals the precursor hormone known as pregnenolone needed to make progesterone in your body. This increase in cortisol creates a decrease in progesterone. This imbalance impacts restorative sleep, and it also leads to anxiety, irregular cycles, weight gain, and many other common perimenopausal symptoms. The reason this is so important to understand is the instinct for high performers during this time is to double their efforts, push harder, and grind more to fix the issues they feel like are changing, which in turn will make symptoms worse because cortisol rises and keeps the body in a chronic state of stress, inflammation, and dysregulation, which you will see as we continue to cover more over those symptoms. So, the second common thread is brain fog. Word retrieval slows down. You walk into a room and you forget why you're there. In the middle of a sentence, you lose the thread. You sit down to make a decision you could have made in 30 seconds 3 years ago, and then you suddenly freeze. Estrogen has a protective and activating effect on the brain, specifically on regions that are there tied to memory, executive function, verbal recall. When estrogen fluctuates, these systems fluctuate with it. The third thing, it's anxiety without a specific source, because it's not situational. You're not anxious about a specific thing. It's just there, like humming in the background, a low-grade dread or vigilance that just sits there regardless of what's happening around us. This is the estrogen, serotonin, and estrogen dopamine connection. When estrogen is in flux, the mood regulation systems that depend on those neurotransmitters are in flux too. So when women at this point get put on antidepressants for all of this, all of the time, and what they really need is someone who knows what they're doing to look at their hormones and their response to stress. And alongside the anxiety, there's something else that doesn't really get talked about enough. It's frustration, but it's not even frustration, it's rage even. When your capacity feels like it's run out before you finish what you need to do, and you don't know why, the emotional response can be sharp and completely disproportionate to the situation at hand. So a comment that would have just like rolled off your back at 38 now hits you like you're being attacked. An issue that used to be a 5-minute fix now produces a response that surprises even you. And this isn't a personality shift or something completely broken. When the hormonal buffer that helped regulate emotional responses is reduced, and the nervous system is already running in a state of heightened reactivity, the threshold for frustrations drops significantly. For women who have spent decades being capable and composed, that loss of emotional predictability is destabilizing. And that loss of control can trigger hypervigilance. So you double down again to work harder, try more to control more details, and push your body further into chronic stress. And of course, making it all worse. And then all of this impacts the body's perception, the perception of danger, not the actual danger. And as ovarian hormone production drops, the nervous system becomes significantly more reactive to perceived threats. Things that used to roll off you now trigger a full cortisol response. A difficult email, a conflict with a team member, a cash flow dip that would have been a bump in the road at 38 is now a 5-alarm situation in your body. This is also why like loud noises or bright lights or the hum of the neighbor's backhoe as they put in a new driveway can make you feel like you're losing your freaking mind. And this is also what happens when the hormonal buffer of estrogen and progesterone is reduced. It impacts sensitivity and capacity because those hormones help regulate the HPA axis, which is your hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal stress response system. And this is also why I stress adrenal support with all of my clients. It's a critical piece of the puzzle that often gets completely overlooked. Less buffer means more reactivity. More reactivity means more inflammation. And inflammation drives fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, and immune dysfunction. Then these things feed the stress loop and the compounding accelerates. And it compounds faster after estrogen begins to drop than it ever did before. Now, here's what I want you to be really clear about before we go any further, because this is where a lot of women get frustrated when they start looking for answers. This is not just an estrogen dropped and that's the reason for everything answer. That framing is it's way too simple. And it sets you up for disappointment when simple solutions don't work or they feel harder than they should. What we're talking about right here is a synergistic relationship between your hormones, your central nervous system, your body's perception of safety, your goals, your relationships, and your sense of purpose. These things are not separate. They talk to each other constantly. Your stress response affects hormone production. Your sense of purpose affects your nervous system's baseline. Your relationships affect your cortisol. Your perception of safety determines what your body thinks it needs to prioritize right now. All of it's woven together, which is why this isn't as simple as just taking a supplement or adding estrogen or restructuring your schedule. It requires an understanding of how all the systems work together and what happens when one is asking too much of the others. Our relationship with sugar changes. Our relationship with insulin changes. Our relationship with ourselves changes. And trying to hold on to the way that we used to operate in a body that has fundamentally shifted doesn't serve where we're going. It serves only where we've been. Now, the FSH test problem. When you bring these symptoms to your traditional doctor, the standard move is to run an FSH test. FSH is the follicle stimulating hormone. If this level is elevated, it can indicate perimenopause. But during perimenopause, FSH fluctuates wildly. You can have a completely normal test result on one day, and a week later, it can be elevated and different. A single normal reading does not rule out perimenopause, but that is often exactly how it gets interpreted. Women walk into these appointments and then they get a normal test result and then they leave feeling completely deflated and confused with a distinct feeling that they're overreacting. This is a complete gap in our health system, not a personal failure. So let's talk about why this gap exists. Until the mid to late 1990s, not the 1890s, the 1990s, when most of us were in high school or college, women were routinely excluded from standard health research studies. Excluded. The studies that established how drugs work, how disease presents, how the body responds to treatment, those studies were conducted on men. And the assumption was that the findings would translate. And they don't. This is part of why women report more negative reactions to medications, more difficulty getting accurate diagnoses, and more consistent dismissal when their symptoms don't match the expected picture. That expected picture was drawn from male subjects. Here's a great example of why that's critical to understand. More men experience heart attacks than women, but a higher percentage of women die from them, particularly in the first year. Harvard Health has written about this pattern. A significant factor is that women's heart attack symptoms look different than men's. No crushing chest pain, no grabbing at their left arm. Instead, women experience fatigue, jaw pain, nausea, shortness of breath, because much of women's heart-related risk is tied to hormone depletion and imbalance, and the diagnostic framework was not built with that in mind. The criteria were built from the research, and the women weren't included in most of the research. This is the reality of medicine for women, and it's a direct reason why so many women in perimenopause spend years without answers thinking they're losing their freaking minds. Now, the most common response when this conversation comes up is just replace the hormones. Get on HRT, bioidentical hormones, problem solved, right? And I understand why that sounds like the answer. HRT can definitely be a tool that helps some of the women some of the time. And I'm not here to talk you out of it. Some women start hormone therapy and have positive results, and some women start and feel significantly worse. It's not random. It's a reflection of the state of the whole system the hormones are entering. And building that system is the foundational work, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about next. There are 6 areas that become significantly more important once estrogen starts to decline, not because they were optional before. They were never optional. But the margin for error is smaller after 40. The compounding happens faster. And the gap between women who are intentional about these 6 areas and the women who aren't becomes visibly much more fast in this phase. First, there's diet. As estrogen drops, insulin sensitivity changes. The eating pattern that kept you lean and clear-headed at 35 may not serve you at 48. This is why so many women suddenly have issues with weight gain, body composition, and workout routines when they hit perimenopause. This is not about eating less. And it's why you feel like punching someone when they say weight loss is just calories in and calories out. It's about understanding that your body's relationship to blood sugar, to carbohydrates, to inflammatory foods has shifted. Estrogen plays a role in insulin sensitivity. And when it drops, the body's ability to manage blood sugar becomes less efficient. Excess sugar and processed foods now drive more inflammation, more weight accumulation in the midsection specifically, and more cognitive interference than they ever did before. Anti-inflammatory foods, quality protein, healthy fats, fiber, and cruciferous vegetables, these are no longer optional. They are daily base requirements. 2, detox pathways. This one almost never comes up in mainstream perimenopause conversations, and it should. And when people do bring it up, they stop at the liver. The liver is absolutely one amazing detox pathway, but your lymphatic system is the other one that matters enormously here and almost never gets mentioned at all. Your liver processes and breaks down used estrogen so they can leave your body. If those detox pathways are sluggish, the broken down estrogens get recirculated back into the body. That recirculation can contribute to symptoms that look like estrogen dominance, including bloating, mood swings, irregular periods, and breast tenderness, even though your overall estrogen levels are declining. Supporting liver detox through cruciferous vegetables, adequate fiber, consistent hydration, and limiting dairy and alcohol is directly relevant to how you experience this transition. Your lymphatic system is your body's waste removal network. It moves cellular debris, excess fluids, immune cells, metabolic waste. It moves it all out of your tissues. Now, unlike your circulatory system, the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump moving it through. It moves through muscle contraction, breath, and movement, which means if you're sitting at your desk all day, or you're chronically dehydrated, or under significant stress, lymphatic drainage slows down. Waste accumulates, inflammation builds, and the symptoms that you're already managing will get worse. In perimenopause, when the inflammation load is already higher and the body's buffering capacity is already reduced, a sluggish lymphatic system is not a minor issue. It's compounding. Movement, hydration, deep breathing, and things like dry brushing, massage, and rebounding are how you keep this system moving. This isn't just like spa advice, it's biochemistry. All right, let's move back around and circle back to sleep. Progesterone and GABA connection, I already described that earlier. What I want to address here is this. Sleep in this phase is not a nice to have. It's a physiological requirement for hormone regulation, immune function, and metabolic function, and cognitive performance. The chronic disruption that perimenopause creates will accumulate. It'll accumulate over months and years. It affects memory, decision-making, emotional regulation, and inflammatory load. If you're not getting restorative sleep, everything else that you're doing to support your body is working against a built-in handicap. Let's move on to hydration. Estrogen affects hydration at the cellular level. As it drops, cells have a harder time retaining water. So your skin dries out, your joints start to ache, fascia becomes less pliable. The lymphatic system that we just talked about will slow down. Most women are chronically underhydrated, and in this phase, that deficit shows up as joint pain, brain fog, and sluggish detoxification. And this isn't just drink 8 glasses of water a day situation. It's about understanding that the quality and the consistency of your hydration is directly affecting how your body thinks, how it moves, and how it processes everything else that you're putting into it. And I know a lot of people are not going to like this, drinking coffee, black tea, diet drinks, and alcohol will make hydration issues worse. All right, let's move to movement and specifically weight training. Now, before this phase, estrogen was working in the background to support insulin sensitivity, bone density, and preserving muscle. When estrogen drops, the body becomes more vulnerable to muscle loss, bone loss, and metabolic slowdown. Muscle is a metabolic organ. It's the primary site for glucose uptake into the body. So building and maintaining muscle mass becomes one of the most direct tools you have for maintaining blood sugar, preventing midsection weight gain, and keeping your metabolism working. Muscle also produces anti-inflammatory effects and supports brain function. And weight training is one of the most evidence-based interventions available for bone density and preventing menopausal bone breaks. Look, this is not about going to the gym, about aesthetics. This is about building a strong physical infrastructure to carry you through the next 30 years. To me, being in the gym is a love letter I send to my 80-year-old self every single time I pick up a weight. Now, finally, adrenal support. This is the one that ties everything else together. The adrenals are supposed to pick up hormone production as the ovaries slow down, but that only works when the adrenals have the reserve to do it. Years of high output, chronic stress, poor sleep, elevated cortisol, they'll drain that reserve. And women who enter perimenopause with depleted adrenals experience that cascade I've been talking about, and they experience it much harder and much faster. Supporting adrenal function through adequate rest, through not staying in chronic fight or flight, through nutrition that supports cortisol regulation and detox pathways is what determines whether this transition feels like a natural evolution or a train. And the difference between those two experiences, it's not luck. It's purposeful, informed choices. All right, let's tie this all together and bring it back to your business, because everything I've described has a business consequence. And here is what the symptoms can do to a business when they go unnamed and unaddressed. When brain fog and sleep deprivation are affecting decision-making and a woman doesn't know why, she may start to second guess calls she would have made without blinking. The confidence she had in her own judgment starts to feel less solid, and she starts to attribute it to her losing losing her edge, rather than to a neurological effect on estrogen fluctuation and chronic sleep deprivation, because nobody told her that was a thing. The number of women who come to me for help because they've stopped trusting themselves is enormous. And this is where that happens. When energy and outputs are the engine of the business, and that energy becomes unpredictable, a week that feels sharp, followed by a week of dragging, it creates a planning problem. The business structure that was built around a consistent high output operator starts to misalign with what's available. And without understanding what's really driving that inconsistency, it just looks like something is just wrong. And then there's the revenue conversation. Chronic inflammation, disrupted sleep, and a taxed nervous system degrade the quality of the highest level work. That work that requires the creative thinking, the flow, the strategic vision, the ability to walk into a room and read what's happening and respond with intelligence and authority. And that work suffers when your system is carrying the physiological load of unaddressed perimenopause. And the most common response is to double down, push harder, force the output. And the harder you push against a nervous system that's signaling for a different approach, the worse the symptoms will get. The inflammation compounds, sleep deteriorates, the brain fog deepens. I watched this become the last straw before autoimmune disease in my own health practice for 15 years, and crawling back from that is a hell of a lot harder than addressing it before it even gets there. Now, look, this isn't a complete meltdown malfunction situation. This is not evidence that you're losing it. This is not a sign that your best years are behind you. This is a developmental transition with a specific biology. And the reason it feels so destabilizing for so many accomplished women is not because it's catastrophic. It's because nobody gave you the framework for it. You walked into your 40s with absolutely no roadmap for this territory, a medical system not equipped to catch it, a cultural story that framed this phase as invisible, and a business built around a version of you that no longer exists. What the matriarch phase requires is a different operating model, not less ambition, not scaling back, not retiring into invisibility. A model that accounts for how your body functions now, what kind of energy you have and when, and what your nervous system can hold and for how long. What work lights you up rather than what drains you. The 6 areas we covered, diet, detox pathways, sleep, hydration, movement, and weight training, these are not a wellness checklist just to feel good about. These are the physiological foundations of your new operating model. When these are working, your nervous system has the capacity to handle more. Your adrenals have the reserve to pick up what your ovaries are setting down. Your brain has the fuel it needs to function effectively, and your body stops reacting like you're in imminent danger, and it starts supporting you again. So here's what I want you to take from this episode. This is not just a mindset issue or burnout or a tough time to push through. Trust what your body has been telling you. You do not need a diagnosis to know you're stepping into this phase. If you're experiencing several of the symptoms that we already talked about today, believe them as your truth that the shift is happening. Every woman experiences this phase differently. The combination of symptoms, the timing, the intensity, all of it varies. What I've described today is the landscape, not your specific map. But here is what is true, regardless of how it shows up for you. You can participate in this transition and influence your experience, or you can have it happen to you outside of your participation and control. And if you want to explore hormone therapy, yes, find a medical professional who can prescribe it. But go in with clear eyes and without the expectation that it's a single magic solution. It can absolutely be part of the answer for some women, but it can also create more chaos if the foundation is not there to support it. A prescribing doctor is just one piece of the puzzle, but even in the most excellent conventional medical provider conditions, they don't have the training or the capacity to support your full system. The nutritional piece, the energetic piece, the nervous system piece, the business redesign that this transition typically requires piece. That requires a different kind of support, and that's the work that I do. Start with the 6 we talked about today. Pick the area that is most clearly not working for you right now and make one deliberate change this week. The compounding works in both directions. Consistent, intentional support accumulates over time exactly the way symptoms do. And for the women who are already doing all of the things, I hear you and I see you. If you feel like you're already eating well, you're moving your body, you're sleeping and managing the stress and still not getting the results that you want, there are answers for you too. Doing all of the things is not the same as doing the right things in the right combination for where your system is right now. And it's genuinely difficult to audit yourself when you're emotionally attached to what you're doing. And I say this with love and with personal understanding. When your identity is built around being someone who figures it out, this can be an incredibly difficult transition to navigate, to interpret, and to break down on your own. An outside perspective that is not invested in your current approach, who can look at the full picture nutritionally, energetically, nervous system related, and your business all together, not in separate columns, can be incredibly freeing. That outside read is often where the real answers live, and that's the work that I do. This is not about lowering your expectations. It's about building the right foundation so you can keep going at a high level for another 20 or even 30 years without your body becoming the limiting factor in what you're able to create. Look, you're not imagining this. You're not losing your edge. You're not becoming someone you won't recognize. But you are in a transition that your body has been moving through quietly for a lot of you, or not so quietly, for potentially years without anyone handing you a map. And that's not a personal failing. It's a gap in the conversation we've been having about women's health as a culture. And I think it's well past the time to close that. And if you're at the point where your capacity, your revenue, or your decision making has shifted in ways that you can't fully explain, and you want to understand what's driving that and build a new operating model that fits who you are now, the Richly Resource Audit is a fantastic place to start. It looks at your physiology, your stress response, your business structure, and your energy together, not as separate components. Go to evolveminded.com/audit for more details. All right, deep breath. I will see you on the next episode.